Okay. So today's topic is Active Directory. Active Directory means I've already explained you. Like Active Directory means it is a Microsoft Identity and Access Management Services. So as the name itself is telling, this Active Directory service will provide the facility of identity and access management. Means it will help you to create an user account, computer object, and setting up the password for each and every account, and help you to create the group policies in order to control the computers in a central place, and that central place is nothing but Active Directory domain controller. Okay, so so that is what the Active Directory. We'll learn more about the Active Directory in the next slides. But before we get into the actual Active Directory, if there is no Active Directory, what will be the condition, or what status the computer will be there? If no Active Directory, that the computers will be in the work group. Okay, so work group means it is a group of computers where the computers are interconnected to each other. Okay, computer. Say for example, if you look at the picture here in the down right side. Okay, if you look at the picture here, yeah, if you look at the picture here, this work group picture, see the computer here you have four computers. Okay, computer 1, computer 2, 3 and 4. They are connected each other. Computer 1 can talk to the another 3 computers. Similarly, computer 4 can talk to the another 3 computers. So there is a communication between each computer. But however, why we call it as work group, there is no a central mechanism. If you want to, say for example, if you want to make a changes to any computer, say for example you want to add the wallpaper for all the 4 computers, you don't have any mechanism by sitting at one place to apply the wallpaper to all the computers. You have to manually log into each and every computer and set it. So this will be helpful only when you have lesser number of computer. Okay, say for example you have 20-30 computers and you have 1 or 2 engineers in the office, then it is fine. Imagine if you have a big organizations like Microsoft, no, TCS, Accenture, IBM, and blah blah, many other companies, you have n number of employees there and n number of computers will be there. Okay, and use engineers also will be less because there everywhere is automated. Okay, lot of automations will be there. So just to make sure the automation is working fine or not, we will have the engineers. Okay, so then that is the case, it is not a viable option. The work group is not a viable option, and also it does not exhibit any security, because IT means it runs on communication and security only, correct? Nah? So the hence the communication, the security is the key in the very crucial in the IT. So that is the reason work group will not be useful there. And I was also explaining you, you have a computer at your home and you can create user account for you and your brother or sister. Okay, but when you guys logged into the computer with by using your account, but after logging in you can see the data of others also, and he or she can also see the data of yours also. So there is no security. Okay, that is the reason what we have done, instead of having it in the work group, there is a concept called Active Directory. You can install the Active Directory and create the domains. So what is the advantages are there compared to the work group in the domain? Let me explain now. Okay, so if you look at here, domain means first of all it's a security boundary. Okay, so what is work group? It is unsecure, but domain means it's a security boundary. Like you are putting the fencing for your property. Say for example you have property of 5 acre or 10 acre, imagine a land. So what you do, you will do the fencing and you will put the gate. That means anybody wish to get in, they cannot come. Since you have fencing, it is fully secured. They have to come with the main door, that too with the permission, correct? Now, or you might have gone to multiple interviews in the IT, correct? Now, if you go to any of the facilities, maybe if you go to Electronic City or Manyata, or if you go to Whitefield, if you go to Manyata, you might have noticed at the SEZ itself you have the securities. They will allow you only when you have the call letter or you have the interview letter, correct? Interview confirmation email, you have to show them. only then they will allow you to the facility. Again, when you go to the office, there also in the office security, you have to show the identity, then only they will allow you, otherwise they will not allow. The same fashion goes for the domain. So domain means it's a security boundary where you can create the user accounts, and if anybody want to access anything within the domain, you have to prove your identity and authenticity. Means you have to prove your username and you have to enter your password, then only the an authentication will be no validated, and then it will be allowed. Okay, and that is the one thing. Another one thing is you can even control the devices by just logging into a one computer, and you can control the n number of computers. Okay, that will help you to do centralized authentication and centralized administration. So when I say centralized authentication, if you look at the second picture here, there is a box. This box is nothing but a server. It is a domain controller. We will call it as DC. DC means it's domain controller. If you look at in the first picture, you don't have any domain controller. You have only switch. It is a network switch. But here you have network switch as well as a domain controller. See, this is a network switch. So the computers are interconnected to have the communication among each other, but all the computers are pointed to a domain controller. So what happens here, when I told you if you want to create a user account, I will never create the user account in this computer. Here we don't create the user accounts in the local computer. Instead we will create here in the domain controller, and I told you the like India, Bangalore, under Bangalore IT. Under this we will create like user 1, user 2, user 3, user 1, user 2, user 3. Okay, and then we will grant access to the computers. So for this computer, user 1 should have access, this computer user 2 has got access, this computer user 3 should have access. So say for example, today you are in India, tomorrow on a business trip you will go to US, and you have some data which is kept in your OneDrive, and that is a very crucial PPT to present something to the clients at the USA, and you don't have anybody to send the data because it is there in your OneDrive. There you ask your administrator, I forgot my laptop and my laptop is there, I need to access my OneDrive. What he can do, he can give access to your computer in the local computer there in the USA. Here like India is there, no? Like probably one more is there here, USA. So this USA, one computer, say for example one computer is there, he can grant you access to the computer. As soon as you log into this USA computer, you can access your OneDrive also there. All the data which is there in your OneDrive can be accessed there as well, and you can copy the data, whatever data you wanted from the OneDrive. Okay, this is how the Active Directory will help you. And when you enter the username and password here, say for example the user 1 is trying to log into the computer 1, and when you enter the username and password, the authentication will not happen in the local computer because the users are created in the domain controller. As soon as you enter your username and password, there is an authentication request initiated, and they will ask the domain controller, hey you computer domain controller, I have got a user to log in and he is entering his username and password, can you please validate whether he is authentic or not? When it initiated the query, the domain controller, we call it as a Kerberos query. Okay, I'll explain more about it later. There is a Kerberos query. So what it will do, it will just go to the domain controller and look for the username, whether the username is present it or not. Yes, the username is present. Yes, then he will validate the password, whether the entered password is valid or not. If it is valid, then he will give a token. Then he will tell, yes, this user is an authentic user, and he will give a token called TGT, ticket granting ticket token, and the token is valid for 10 hours. Okay, that is the reason if you are already working in some organization, when you go to early morning, when you go to the office, when you enter your username and password, the login will take 2-3 seconds. But in the afternoon or any break time, if you just go out and come after a break, if you put enter name and username and password in enter, within fraction of seconds the computer logs in, because that time the computer never talked to the domain controller for the authentication, because the authentication is already proved when morning when you log in at the first time. Correct na? Now since the ticket has got, it is just allowing. Say for example, when you go to the movie theater, you will have a ticket. Correct na? And that ticket is valid for that particular show 2.5 hours. You can go out n number of times. You can come inside the theater n number of times. Correct na? That the same thing happens here. So first time when you go, you have to show the ticket. He will verify the ticket. He will verify the timings. So I mean session, everything he will verify, and then he will allow gatekeeper. Correct na? But second time during the interval time and all, nobody will ask you, because he knows that you already have a ticket. Correct na? So that is how this work group and domain will help you. Any question here, guys?
No, sir.
Yeah, see, that is the difference between the work group and the domain. Now you are feeling interested, okay? You are feeling interested because one more thing I missed to explain you, which is centralized administration. In this case, if you want to apply a group a wallpaper, you need to log into each and every computer in the work group, okay, here. But in case of domain, it is not like that. You log into the domain controller, go to the OU where you want to apply the policy, right click and create a new policy, group policy, and select which wallpaper to send. To send that wallpaper as that particular image as wallpaper for all the computers, you believe it or not, within 30-40 seconds all the computers will have the wallpaper created. So that is called as centralized administration, and that is the reason people will always go with domain, because domain will increases the security. It will help you to keep the hierarchical structure of your organization, and since you are keeping it hierarchical structure, the centralized administration will be easy. Okay, that is what the difference between the main difference between the work group and the domain. Now you are getting interest, okay, you are feeling like, yes, instead of work group, the domain is very very good, because domain will help you to do lot of things. Then how can I convert my work group environment into a domain environment? Yes, that is possible using a service called Active Directory Domain Services. This Active Directory Domain Services, as I already told you, it is Microsoft proprietary service, or it's Microsoft own property, okay, which will help you to convert or promote and work group into a domain environment, which is secured domain environment. Okay, means if you install the Active Directory domain services in the computer, in the server operating system, not in the client computers, guys, you should always have the server operating system. See here, I have mentioned here couple of server operating systems here. Okay, so 2022 also you can add now, 2022. Okay, so if you have a operating system like Windows Server, Windows client, actually server means starting from Windows NT and 2008, 2012, 2016, 19, 2022. So only these three are in the support now. Microsoft is supporting only 2016 to 2020, 22, and rest are legacy. Legacy means old and there is no support. Okay, and client also Windows XP to Windows Vista, they are legacy, and these are in support now. Okay, they are legacy. Legacy in support. Okay, so now let us understand more on the Active Directory. So we have to, so what we will get it after installing the Active Directory domain services, I told you, you can promote a work group into a secure domain environment. And what is the use of it actually? What are the benefits of it? The same thing I'll explain now. It provides you centralized authentication. If you look at here, you as an administrator, okay, you are creating the user accounts in the Active Directory. Here there you three users are there. Imagine you are adding one more user, fourth user. Okay, so when the user logs in, try to log into the computer here. Okay, so as soon as you enter the username and password, the same thing happens. The Kerberos authentication request will come and it will go to the Active Directory domain controller and it will get the validation of the username and password. Okay, username and password. Once the authentication is proved, you will just send back a ticket granting ticket TGT request. So this is called as centralized authentication. Means when the user enter the password, the authentication is not getting validated in the local computer. The username and password will be sent to the domain controller to validate the username and password. If it is validated, then it will be sending back with an authentication ticket granting ticket request. Okay, that is what we call it as centralized authentication. No matter wherever the users are there, if the user is working from home, if the user is in office, if the user in Hyderabad, Pune, wherever he is, it will always go to the domain controller and it will validate the authentication and then only it will be allowed. That is called as centralized authentication. Okay, and next one is centralized administration. The same thing I already told you. To control these users and computers, if you want to control these many computers and these many users, you don't need to go to each and every user or each and every computer. You just have to log into this domain controller as an administrator. See, you are logging in here, that's all. By logging into the Active Directory domain controller, if you want to make any changes, you can do for all the computers. Okay, if you want to apply a group policy to set the wallpaper, just go and create a policy and apply for this group of users or group of computers. Or if you want to disable the USB pen drive, just go to the Active Directory domain controller, go to group policy, go to that particular value, create a policy and apply. So that is called as centralized administration. Here you are not logging into each and every computer, you are logging into just domain controller to do the administration. That is called as centralized administration. And single sign on. So single sign on means when you go to the office every day morning, you will enter your username and password. So that one time authentication is done and you have the ticket. And if you want to access any other application of your office, you don't need to enter the username and password again and again, because that kills your time. Correct. Now at least you need at least 5 to 10 seconds of time, and again multi-factor authentication, you have to wait for the security code and then you have to key in. So that authentication itself will normally take 15 seconds of time. Sometimes if the OTP is not coming, you have to wait for 20-25 seconds also. So to avoid that kind of delay, we have enabled single sign on. This will facilitate you to enable single sign on. Means one sign on is enough, one sign in is enough for the day. You don't need to again and again put the username and password within your computers, okay, to access any other office application which is enabled with single sign on. Okay, that is the one of the other feature. Okay, and then this Active Directory installed server, we will call it as domain controller. See, this Active Directory I have installed here, so I should not call it as simply a server, I can call it as DC. DC means it is domain controller. So any computer which has got the Active Directory installed, and that server we will call it as a domain controller. Any question here?
No, sir.
Yeah, I will not be very much speed because this is very important. Okay, so 2 days theory will be there. Try to consume the information and stop me if you have any doubts or if you have any questions. Okay. Now let us understand the components. Since this is actually a new thing for you, correct? Now for first time you are hearing the Active Directory, only one or two people has got some idea about the Active Directory. But since most of the people are new to this, let me explain the components of the Active Directory. So when I say Active Directory, some terminologies will be there and some components will be there. Okay, you need to understand before I get into the actual theoretical topic. Okay, so let us understand the components of the Active Directory. So when I say Active Directory components, there are two types of components in the Active Directory. The first one is physical component and the second one is logical component. So after COVID, the entire world got divided into two things. One is physical, another is virtual. correct na? And the logical. So what do you mean by physical and what do you mean by logical? Can somebody, guys, what do you mean by physical and what do you mean by logical?
Physical means manual.
Okay,
Logical means smart work, I guess.
logical means,
Smart
okay. So
thinking.
yeah, any other answers, guys?
Sir,
Yep.
physical means fixed one, and logical means and changed one. Anytime changed, changes.
Okay. So can I say physical means which you can touch and feel? So you have your laptop in front of you. Now you are attending the class. You can touch your laptop or your mobile phone and you can feel it. Can I call it as physical?
Yes, sir.
Yep.
Yes, sir.
Logical means you guys are thinking. So I am sitting somewhere in the remote, okay, and how I am sitting, what kind of tools or devices I am using. So logically, you guys are thinking. Or when you look at it, I'll make it even more simple. Logical means it is imaginable, correct? Na? It is depend upon. It is very relative actually. See, when you look at a problem, the logic behind resolving the issue in my perception will be different, and when you look at the same problem, maybe you have a very easy way of resolving the issues, correct na? So the logical means it is imaginable, correct, right? You can only imagine, you cannot touch and feel it. That is what the logical means physical components means the components which you can touch and feel. Logical component means you can only assume, you can only imagine. Those components can be called as logical component. Okay, so the components which you can touch and feel, those are physical components, and the logical means those you can only imagine. Okay, those are called as the logical components. So let me explain you with the graphics or with the written, then you will understand better. Okay, say for example, you have bought a new server. Okay, you have bought a new server, and this is your very first domain controller. Okay, and you have installed the active directory here, adds you have installed. Okay, and you have created a first domain, maybe microsoft.com, and this is for Bangalore location. Okay, this is for Bangalore location. Since this is the first domain controller of Microsoft.com which is deployed in the Bangalore location, and that physical server is present in front of you, or if it is a virtual machine also no problem, that you can see in the VMware console. Okay, that is called as the root domain controller, because that is a root. In your family tree, if I ask you who is your root, it is always your grandfather, correct na? It is always your grandfather and then your father and then you guys will come. So the root of the family is always a grandfather. So in our scenario here, the root domain controller means the very first domain controller in the estate, that is called as root domain controller. So you started a first domain controller in Bangalore location. There were about 1000 users were accessing this application. Then later what you did, you have added one more office in Hyderabad. And initially you started leveraging the Bangalore domain controller only, but later when Hyderabad also more number of users are increasing, then the delay was there. Then you thought of having one more domain controller in Hyderabad. Okay, to the same domain ms microsoft.com. Okay, since you are adding you are adding one more domain controller to balance the load. So the Bangalore domain controller only serving about 5000 users, then Hyderabad also started adding again Hyderabad 5000 users, then the capacity of the server the server 1 was unable to handle both the requests. Then the delay when I enter the username and password, earlier it was happening, the authentication was happening within 1 or 2 seconds. Now it is taking 5 to 6 seconds. Correct. Now see, if you have a work, a limited work, you can do aram say for example, in your organization there were 2 engineers, okay, and you were coming in one shift and he was another person was coming in one shift, so you were easily managing. Due to recession, if one engineer got terminated or removed, then the 2 engineer work a person cannot handle, correct? He will feel difficult. The same thing goes here. So to avoid that kind of delay in performance, we are adding one more additional person, so that the load of the domain controller 1 will be divided into 2 pieces. The Bangalore location will be handled by domain controller 1. The Hyderabad location workload will be handled by Hyderabad. Since here you are adding an additional domain controller to take the load of the computer, to take the load of the Hyderabad location user's request, we call it as additional domain controller. ADC. We will call it as ADC. ADC means it is additional domain controller. Okay, this first one is RDC, root domain controller. Second one is additional domain controller. So there will be only one root domain controller, but n number of additional domain controller can be there. So tomorrow you are starting an office in Pune, you can have one ADC. If you are starting in Delhi, you can add one in ADC. Okay, so there is no limitations for the ADC. You can have n number of domain controller, additional domain controller in each location, or in one location only you can add 2, 3, 4 also. And we have seen in one office only we have 2, 3, because lot of users will be there, so many users will be there, that is the reason. And then child domain controller. See, now you started Microsoft.com. Imagine you started Microsoft.com in India. So then you are planning to establish one more office in USA. So due to the regional restrictions, every company, every country will have their own standards. Some data policies, or some other informations will be there. You cannot use the same office or same domain controller in the other regions as well. So that time what we will do, instead of Microsoft.com, you will create a new domain called us.microsoft.com. This is your child domain. So you have a domain called Microsoft.com. This one, the parent, this is parent. But you are adding a new domain or child domain for the Microsoft.com as US. So this US is the child. Okay, and this is the root. This is what we call it as. Why we create new organization? Why cannot use the same company? Because India has got its own regional restrictions, okay, and UK and US has got their own regional restrictions. They will tell that you cannot transfer the data from one country to another country, and you cannot exchange the data. You cannot have the data transaction between 2 different companies, because there the company regulatory is different. Here the company regulations, rules and regulations are different. That is the reason they will carry the same domain as a parent, but under that they will create small company in US, okay, with the name called us.microsoft.com, and that domain we call it as domain control, we call it as child domain controller. CDC means child domain controller, and this is child domain. Okay, and the next one is RODC. So imagine you have Bangalore office, you have more than 20,000 users, and all the raw materials for the Bangalore office will be coming in ship. Example, so you have around 50 to 100 users in Mangalore harbor. Okay, so in the Mangalore location you have office with 100 users, but always what happens when if you don't have a local domain controller there, when the user try to enter the username and password in the Mangalore office, that always will go to the domain controller in Bangalore location. That will take time. Delay will be there. Application when they launch, it will take some time. uh, and when they open some database, it will be very much slow when they are adding the stock information. So today we have received this stock, and when they try to save the information, it will be taking too much of time, because the domain controller is not in the local location, it is in the Bangalore location. So to avoid that, what we will do, we will create one read only domain controller in the Bangalore location itself, and instead of sending it to the Bangalore location, the authentication will come here, and the connectivity between this computer will be there. So whatever data is there in the root domain controller, that one copy will be coming and sitting in the read only domain controller. But you cannot do any operations in the read only domain controller, because it is having only the read only copy of your database. Okay, you can only read it, you cannot write it, you cannot reset a password, you cannot create a user account, you cannot apply the group policy. Only when the user enter the username and password, the authentication only will happen in the read only domain controller, and nothing else will happen in the read only domain controller. Why do we need it? Why do we need read only domain controller? Why can't we need a standard domain controller, additional domain controller? Because if you want to have an additional domain controller, you need to have bigger computer. Maybe you need to have around 8 GB, 8 CPU, 16 GB memory, and a proper server. When you have a proper server, you need to have a data center. When you have a data center, you need to have a AC support to keep the server cool. And when you have everything, you need to have a resource. So there is huge investment. So if that is the case, I have written small computer here. If you see, the read only domain controller is very small here, but these are all bigger one. See, these are all bigger one, because these are all the actual domain controller, but RODC is small one. Okay, this is what the physical components. You can see all the four things you can touch and feel. That is why we call it as physical components. So in the Active Directory, there are two types of components. One is physical component, another one is logical component. The physical component means the components which you can touch and feel. The logical component means the components you can only imagine. Okay, and next is physical components. If you want to explain, the first one is root domain controller. The very first domain controller we call it as root domain controller, and the second one is ADC, additional domain controller. So to balance the load among multiple locations, multiple domain controllers will be added, and that domain controller we call it as additional domain controller. And the child domain controller, you already have a domain, okay, with Microsoft.com, and you are creating one more domain, some other region or some other country, then that is called as child domain or child domain controller. And the fourth one is read only domain controller. Read only domain controller means it is a copy of the primary or root domain controller or child domain controller, sorry, root domain controller or additional domain controller. All the data of RDC or ADC will be there in the RODC, but it will only exhibit the read permission. You cannot do any write operations in the RODC. Okay, so this is about the physical components. Okay, we are already 5 minutes over on top of the time, so I'll stop it here. Tomorrow we can continue from the logical components. Let me stop the screen recording.